I gave a talk to these millionaires and billionaires recently. One of the gentlemen said, "You ever hear about Carl Lewis?" And he said, when they asked Carl Lewis how he was so successful as a runner, he said he didn't look to the 100-yard mark. He looked 10 yards past it. If your dad died at 80 years old, don't live your life like you're going to die at 80. Keep looking long past that. So for me, I haven't had a reason that I want to spend the time looking back. It's how do we build as we go forward?
Welcome to the Calgary Sessions. This is episode number 166.
Son of a gun.
I'm your host, Jeff Humphreys. Before I get into it, I'm trying to get some more attention around the show. If you would actually write a review, not just put a star on. If you actually leave comments, whether you like this or not.
Everything in my teeth.
Oh yeah, you're good. That'd be appreciated. Today's guest, Mr. Gordon Breaux from the Speakers Bureau of Canada, did this intro. Had Gordon on the show a while ago, and he was awesome, and he always has good suggestions. So I'm looking forward to this one. Name and who you are, please.
Ross Memphis Pambrun. Now that's the stage name, Ross Pambrun.
And who are you?
You know, that's a very loaded question, and I love that you started there. There's sort of a very authentic sort of when you come across like that. The journey that I've been on for many years has taken me at a point where a collision happened as part of my journey. I used to sort of keep my science side separate from my entertainment side, separate from sort of the relationships and the community that I served and these kind of things. And as time went on, as I started to put a few years on, and I'll often comment to my audience that, you know, folks, I'm 51, but I pretty much play 35 on TV. So, thankfully I'm doing all right. This collision happened where all of a sudden the intersection of the art that I was in, the creative side that I was in, the academic side, the social side, all these things came together. And when a group like the Speakers Bureau of Canada said, "We love that you have an identity, but what the audience really wants to hear is the authentic side of who you are." Mm. And it didn't occur to me originally. I was thinking that people wouldn't believe you if you were an entertainer, but you worked in this science world. And then on the other side of it, like the entertainment world doesn't want to know anything about what's happening outside of that, but that's actually not true. Mm. So this collision happened. I've been a speaker now for a while, and I just want to throw this out there as you, for anybody who may be visually impaired, who may or may not be listening, I'm wearing a wonderful jacket that represents a lot of the culture of who I am, and it's adorned with the flowers of Louis Riel. I have a pin that's a moose hide on the back, and it's a poppy as thank you to our Aboriginal veterans. So if you're visually impaired otherwise, hopefully I've given you a little bit of an idea. Again, I already commented that I look a little heavier on TV. I think that's the nature of being Métis. But apart from that, then the glasses that I wear, they're just there to try and make me get through all this because Lord knows as I'm getting older, it just seems like everything's getting a little harder. Mm. But so the idea of this collision was I take myself back to where this kind of kicked off. And I'm going to get to that collision, I think is what's going to happen here. Mm. I had parents from Saskatchewan. Dad was a soldier. Mom was a nurse, married young. In fact, they just celebrated their 60th wedding anniversary. And I don't hear that happen too often. And so for the idea that these are two Saskatchewan parents, when Dad turned 60, this was his opportunity to decide, does he become a priest or does he join the military? Well, Dad joined the military, so I was born overseas. Mm. And when we came back to Canada, lived all across Canada, sometimes as I do my talks, when I'm on the East Coast, I say that's some good. When I'm on the West Coast, I say that's damn good. And you start to understand a little bit of the colloquialisms. And through that journey, I had an Indigenous background that started to open up. And I wanted to give back to people. And I had an older brother. And he said, if you don't know what you're going to do, Ross, why don't you become a nurse? So as I became a registered nurse, eventually the opportunity to serve in a different way, I became a professional firefighter. Mm. And those years of service have added up. But I wasn't always learning. Didn't feel like I was always learning. So as I was growing up, I became an entertainer. I ended up buying an occupational health company that I sold nationally. I had all of these worlds that were coming forth at the same time. But I wanted to continue to participate with my community. I wanted to learn more about the Indigenous journey. I wanted to understand a little bit of the Métis background that came from my father's side. I wanted to figure out a way to celebrate, give back to the kids. How do they learn? How do they follow their journey? How do they follow the spirit? Well, all of a sudden, again, these intersections that keep happening, I started working with artificial intelligence. I would give talks about the Indigenous communities, create the awareness, try and bring people in to participate. All of a sudden, I'm playing music. Next thing you know, I started a podcast for myself that's ended now, but it was about bringing the Indigenous community together, hearing from the advanced academics, hearing from the people who built spirit in our community, hearing from the musicians. So the success of this little podcast went from something that was a weekly podcast to an actual show that was all of a sudden, available on television. Well, one of the directors that I was working with at the time said, so let me get this straight. You know how to lead people because you've been in service as a firefighter for 25 years. You understand community. You understand people because you've worked as a nurse. You participate in the Métis community. You know how to look back at the earth because you own a satellite company that does environmental monitoring. You are a musician who celebrates the culture of both country and Western, and a little bit of rock and roll, but you also participate with the Indigenous community by always being available for them. You have a podcast, and he said to me, do you want to search for gold in Manitoba? And with no hesitation, I said, I do. And he says, well, are you familiar with a bit of the story from the Métis community back in the late 1800s? And I said, you know what? I do know a little bit about that story. And so I have 2 seasons that are coming out right away called Red River Gold that I filmed with my team searching for gold. So when you say, where do you want to start? That's the collision that occurred to me.
Yeah.
And one day I'll be on a plane and like last year I was in New York City talking at the Wall Street Journal Future of Everything conference about the social progress of artificial intelligence. Next day, I'm on a flight back into Canada to talk to somebody about the Indigenous community and how we need to continue to build spirit and talk about the idea of truth and reconciliation. Next day after that, I could be working as a firefighter because that's sort of my career. Day after that, all of a sudden I'm assisting when it comes to environmental earth observation and how we protect our communities. The day after that, I could be back in Manitoba filming with my group as we're hunting for lost gold. Day after that, I could be flying back to Alberta, playing with my band, Memphis and the Grand. The thing I've learned along this route is if you surround yourself with the best, the strongest people who have passion and will, everything around you turns to gold. And if you can celebrate that with everybody, share the experience, and see the joy that they get as you have successes together, work to remove the toxic people in your life. When you surround yourself with great people, great things happen. It's amazing.
I agree. It seems simple, but it's sometimes it can be tricky to pull that off. It's funny. So as soon as you got here, I told you I don't do any research on anybody. And so what I do is like, I figure out that they're either how they fit: artist, entrepreneur, athlete, right?
Yeah.
So I have a loose understanding of where you fit. So yesterday I was like, well, I should probably just, double check what I think I know. So I Google you and I was like, what the fuck? And then that's all I did. I said, what the fuck? And then I shut it all down. So as you talked about these collisions, you touched on a bunch of the different pieces of who you are and how they all work. So this would be a cool one to actually go all the way back and how it all started. So I'm really curious to just hear how this all unfolds, because I do think there is, you have so many different things going on. I'm not sure how you keep them all going in that one direction. And I'm also very curious to see how when they entered your life and how they all fit. So take this thing back. Where you grew up, how you grew up, parents, siblings. You touched on your parents a little bit, but just walk this thing back as far as you can remember, and we'll kind of weave our way. And I don't think we're going to touch on everything you do.
It may not.
But we'll do our damnedest to kind of do a good job.
I love your approach. That is it's very kind. And as we dig back, as we peel the onion layers back, yeah, we start to find out where those little transitions, the pivots happen. So being born to Saskatchewan parents overseas, and I have an older brother and an older sister, and they're quite successful in their worlds and families and such like that. And I had a few years, no formative years in Germany before we came back. But moving back from Germany, we lived, I think it was Winnipeg in a few different places, Kingston in a few different places. Our family had been in Petawawa in a few different places. And for me, the term army brat is a significant one. And again, I made the comment that I'm 51 now. And every time I meet another army brat, it's a kindred spirit. What happens in that journey is you start to make friends in what feels like kind of a home, but every base generally is relatively the same. They have all the kind of the same setup. You might be living in a PMQ, which for those who are unfamiliar, it's a personal maintenance quarters. This is where your family gets to live. As the military would often comment to my father, and that's sort of the joke, is if the military wanted you to have a family, they would issue you one. But in this case, we have one. So we're living back in Canada and we're moving as needed in order for my father's career as a signalman. And he even started out here in Calgary in the PPCLI. And his goal was always for us to end up out west. That's sort of where family had been before. This is where his connection was. And our Indigenous connection was there. And it wasn't something I was familiar with. So as we come back from Europe and we start to move around throughout the East, my familiarity with being an army brat starts to kick in to the point that it doesn't matter where I land. I'm going to get beat up there. I'm going to have to figure out where I fit in there and hopefully, carve a path for myself. My brother being a little bit older, my sister being a little bit older, sometimes it seemed harder on them because as we would move, they would have to leave what was almost a more established group of friends. But I'd see that. And then as we sort of bounced around a little bit and I started to experience a little bit of the familiarity, Dad finally said, I can't remember when I was probably 8 or 10 years old or 12 or something like that, well, we're moving out west. Didn't mean much to me. It's just going to be another place that we moved to. And we moved to Edmonton. Goal was to get to Calgary because that's where he'd had some experience before, but the economy, the opportunity, this is where he was getting posted, good enough. And every summer, we didn't have a lot of money. Mom was a nurse, I think I commented, but we always did something together. We were always a family together. We were a unit together, and we would get in the van and we'd travel someplace. So we arrive out west, and once again, I got to get started into that same thing. Where am I going to get beat up? Who's going to beat me up? Where am I going to fit in? My older brother was starting to go through the journey of what's he going to do? And Dad had always said to us, if you don't have a job in the summertime, you will be a reservist. My brother was a reservist. And he spent some time overseas and peacekeeping. My sister was a reservist. She served her time in Edmonton, and now they would both be considered Aboriginal veterans, just like my father. And I had applied, and I had been accepted, but I ended up getting a different job that year. And it was kind of a very social job where I had opportunity to meet people. But when you're an army brat, that's what that life is. Every time you arrive someplace new, you got to be the one to step up and say, hey, I'm looking for friends. So it's one of those things now that I cherish. And it's something that I've learned. I don't like it when I lose a friendship. It's a very rare thing, but what I've found is toxic people are still around you. Sometimes you have to realize maybe they were never friends. They were somebody that you had around, and not to say that they didn't serve part of your journey, but they're also now part of that past that sometimes you have to work to let go. But when you're holding on to those friends that are really important to you and you can build them up, they're there for you when you need that step up. So whenever I meet somebody new who says they're an army brat, you can pretty much just go in and give them a hug because they know your journey. So as we ended up in Edmonton, and again, my older brother was off sort of doing his thing, and I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. And he went down the emergency responder route of become a paramedic. And he said to me, you know, it has a lifespan to itself. But he said, did you ever think about being a nurse? Never really considered it, but he said, think about it. Mom was a nurse, took her around the world. When she ended up in Germany with our family, as we were starting out, she didn't know any German. She worked in a German hospital. I applied, got into school at the Royal Alex School of Nursing up in Edmonton, and that's where I started the journey. And as my older brother explained, there's 1,000 different jobs as a nurse. I thought, that's incredible. You're right. You're not just limited to this one aspect of bedside. But as I was very successful in that career, I worked myself up into ICU. In fact, I even got to work with my mother. How crazy is that? I've been out on exercise with my father where they're firing weapons and they're testing out equipment. But this time I was actually working with my mom. Mm. And got married up in Edmonton, shared, a part of my life up there, had a home up in Edmonton. And that time in nursing was what familiarized me with the human frailty. And I saw it also in the concept of the Indigenous relationship when it came to human frailty. And that has still been a grounding point for me in my career now, as I'd moved forward, and I'll jump back and forth a little bit, but as a professional firefighter, all I see is life and death. My wife is a nurse practitioner in hepatology. There isn't a week that she doesn't come home and say, well, I lost my favorite patient. Mm. And the next week she's going to lose another one. Mm-hmm. But that grounding, that time of being in nursing and understanding ICU, CCU, and I moved up to the level of advanced cardiac sciences where we would do interventions into people's hearts. I've seen people's hearts taken out. I've seen them put back in. There isn't any body part that I haven't had a finger in. There isn't any body part that I haven't seen damaged, injured. And we all put a priority on everything else that happens in our lives until we're sick. Mm-hmm. And then the only thing that matters is how do we get that family member healthy? How do we get ourselves healthy? We're all guilty of it. I'm guilty of it too, that often we'll put something before our health. I choose to do this. And I'm not saying don't make that choice. But what I'm saying is really be conscious of the fact of your health and the health of your family. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to our communities, I used to be working at the hospital, and somebody from a First Nations would be sick, and the whole community would show up. And I realized they were there for the spirit. Now, my journey at that time was still in the infancy of what does it mean to be Métis? It was Dad talking about our Indigenous background that we have, but I hadn't started to really participate in the community. I hadn't grown with the community, but I could start to see it as a nurse. I could start to see this experience. So jump forward a couple years, my brother calls, as he often does.
Brothers.
Yeah. And he says, listen, I transitioned, and I knew that from being in the world of paramedics to being a professional firefighter in Fort McMurray. He says, I think you should do this. I thought, well, I've been doing this for a while as a nurse. I thought I'd really enjoy that challenge. So as I jumped into that challenge, it's not easy. I tried it in Edmonton, eventually got picked up by the city of Calgary, and I started my career as a firefighter. Now, the service...
What year was this?
Back in 2001.
That's when you started?
Yeah.
I'm going to give you some context on me. My dad was a fireman for 30 years in Calgary.
Who's your dad?
Al Humphreys.
Yeah, oh yeah.
D shift.
Yeah.
Retired.
There's the name Humphreys right there.
And then, but this one, you might know this one, my younger brother, Keith Humphreys.
Keith Humphreys.
He's been on the force for like 17, 18, 19 years.
Yeah.
So.
And he's not on my shift either.
He's on D shift.
Yeah.
What shift are you?
B shift.
And so I'll keep going with context for you. My dad's brother.
Yeah.
Russ Humphreys.
Yeah.
Retired district chief.
Yeah. Russ I was more familiar with.
My other uncle, Brian Regan, retired district chief.
Okay.
And so
yeah,
the fire world is something I grew up with.
Was you're familiar with, yeah.
So I'm from the Christmas parties to Dad doing 2 on, 2 days, 2 nights for it. Like, yeah. I know it all. I'm like, so it's,
and it's, our go back to how well we connect. right? That 6 degrees of separation is actually sometimes a lot smaller than that. And then you realize there is times somebody will say to me, have you ever worked with that person? And I just worked with that person that day.
Yeah.
It's incredible. And we're a small community when it comes to that. And so when my brother joined the fire department and he said, I think this is something that you should try.
Why did he have that much influence on you? Twice. And this is, and not twice, maybe it's like,
No.
there's other examples earlier, but like two specific
100%.
career-wise at
At 5 years older than me, I started to see, right, he was starting to experience certain things where he was good at explaining, if you went down this path, going into pre-hospital care, it's a challenge.
Yeah.
And, here's another opportunity. Have you ever thought of this avenue? And who doesn't look up to their older brother, right? And I still look up to him.
I'm the oldest.
Oh, yeah. So I bet you every one of your siblings wants to become a podcaster.
But it's you have a different perspective being the young one.
Absolutely. And it's a different weight on you as well when you're the oldest, because when I would go to my brother and ask for just a simple question, it's not something I wanted to ask my dad.
Yeah.
But I could ask my brother. There was a comfort there. We'd shared, a journey of traveling from one place to the next. He got beat up every place he went, same as I did, same as my sister would have to in order to try and find out where you were.
Yeah.
So when he'd throw an idea around, and anytime we would ever work on cars together, my brother, if we could give my dad 3 reasons why we needed a tool, he'd buy it for us and we could fix the car together. Basically. If you could only come up with 2, well, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. We'd always come up with the 3rd. And so, the opportunity to work with them, but there was a big age difference of 5 years. So there was times he would go off on his journey and then we would always find each other. And then life would take you a different journey. But he was always there to answer some of those questions. And my sister was always there as a source of strength, but she went in a different route because she wanted to become a school teacher. Yeah. And her background of being very French took her to the other side of the world where she had the opportunity to work overseas and then eventually come back and end up in Edmonton sort of with the rest of us at the time. But when you have that older brother who can sometimes give you a little bit of that guidance, that was some of the grounding that I have. That was one person who was still always there. Whereas when you had those friends, I didn't know when I was going to be picking up and moving again. For all I knew, Dad was going to get posted again and off I'd go. Yeah. At some point it was going to end because I was going to become an adult. I still don't know if I've reached that. But and so when I ended up down here, I thought, okay, I'm going to take this career path and accept this challenge. And that's the one thing I've always been continuing to search for is the learning. Whenever I give my talks, national, international, there's one statement that I always leave people with, and it's always be learning. And where that comes from is my 25 years in my career, you plateau a little bit. And during that period of time of plateau, I wanted to start to experience some of the care that I had been giving kind of as a nurse. So started this occupational health company. And it was tremendously successful. And then all of a sudden sold it to a national company because that's what you're supposed to do. And the opportunity to learn and provide the care was there again. And I really enjoyed that. But I was working with somebody and we were building a software tool. And the software tool had a machine learning aspect behind it. So that's the big fear. Well, there's artificial intelligence. Yes, but it's machine learning. It's essentially the computer doing most of the algorithms for you. And he said, well, I think there's an opportunity for us to protect communities from fire. Well, that's what I'm doing now. We're living in the world of wildfire. So we've bounced 15 years forward as we're, continuing along this journey. Have I traveled the world? Yeah. Have I been immensely lucky to have seen Michelangelo's David? Have I toured the Hermitage in St. Petersburg, Russia? Don't know if I'm going to get back there anytime soon, but have I been through Italy and spent my time in Firenze? Yes, I'm so grateful. And I understand around the world what is important for us to protect. It's our culture and our identity. I never used to understand that about certain pieces of art. I think about 3 months ago, I was looking at the Mona Lisa in the Louvre. And I was in the d'Orsay, and I'm looking at pieces of art that reminded me of that time when I saw the David. And as I turned the corner in Florence, I couldn't tell you the last time that I lost a breath. I saw this magnificent sculpture, and I thought, this is what Italy protects, that history. A few days later, I was in Pisa. If I walk over to the Leaning Tower, second time I lost my breath. But those are the touch points that ground us and remind me, what do we need to protect? And for me, protecting a cultural relationship became something that's been important to me. Hence the reason why I'd started my podcast, because I wanted to give people voices, the opportunity. There's such an oral tradition in the Indigenous community, so people didn't always have a chance to share everything. So this podcast was meant to be a part of that conversation. And once we reached 100, to me, I had learned, I had shared, and all of a sudden new doors were opening.
Yep.
So here I am now as a firefighter. Here I have owned this company. Here I have all of a sudden explored the idea of artificial intelligence. So I started a company called the Memphis Group. And Memphis comes from my stage name, which is not something that was generally ever shared amongst the firefighters or the world that I was in, unless you knew me as an entertainer, unless you knew that I had a band out there, unless you had a strong relationship with me, you didn't understand where Memphis came from. But at the time, I just needed a placeholder. So I said, start up this company called the Memphis Group.
So I understand the fire life.
Yeah.
And so when you started, it was still 4 on, 4 off.
Yeah.
And so the classic thing about the fire department is that everyone had a moonlighting gig.
Yep. Something to do on the side.
And so my dad was, he framed houses.
Yeah.
So journeyman, framed houses forever before he was on the department, after. So yeah, that's what he had. So as you're, talking about this, you're doing your 4 on, 4 off. Did you know you had room to do other things, or were you just being pulled by different opportunities or experiences? Like, what started to put you on the path of like, well, I'm wondering where the music kicks in and how often you've been doing that, and then starting up the occupational business. Like, how do those enter into the equation as you're doing the 4 on, 4 off, and like why'd they show up?
There's sometimes it's opportunity. Dad always played guitar growing up. And something I learned. He was a strong proponent of music, and Dad could probably still now play 10 different instruments, about 5 songs, but he plays them all well. It doesn't matter what song I play now, Dad will say, I'm going to sing that along with you. He may not know all the chords, but he can keep that tune going. Something he'd always had that experience with. So when I was 18, sometime around that age is when I bought my first guitar.
Was he playing around the house? Like
all the time.
And was music playing around the house? Like, was music a big thing?
Music for him grounded him. And it was important. I saw from that experience, and my dad's a very social man and an Aboriginal veteran now at 33 years of his years of service. And I'd mentioned that they just celebrated Mom and Dad their 60th. So it gives you a bit of an idea how old Saskatchewan housewife and husband are. But I learned at every event that we ever went to, or that Dad would take us to, every military event, when he pulled that guitar out, people wanted to sing. And it was a line I heard from Blue Rodeo so many years ago, having met them, having the opportunity. But when Jim Cuddy said, just wanted to be where people danced. And that's something that I always wanted. In school, I tried different instruments. I tried the band. I tried the trombone. I tried saxophone. But I realized you couldn't sing with it. And the priority for me was to be part of that connection with somebody. And I wanted to help them join in any song. My band is still the same way. I tell anybody at every one of my concerts, if you can play better guitar than these guys that have been playing for 40 years, come on up here, take the guitar out of their hands. But in the meantime, if you want to come up and sing a song, because this is your party too. Every event that I do, everything I do, I want to make it like it's my Saturday night. Why would I not want to enjoy this? So music became one of those things. And if we get to the idea of how music, as I was moving through my musical journey, I ran into Sarah McLachlan one time, and it was down here in Calgary. And I'd been a songwriter for a little while, starting to play music.
A closet? Like, were you keeping this close to your chest? Or was
No. In fact, I was even starting to explore the idea of playing as a solo or a little duo act with people who wanted to try playing with me. Playing little coffee shops. We started playing like Original Joe's and things like that. The
You
one that was
did?
on 4th Street. Yep. But I was 3 hours worth of music I had to play. So I was practicing day and night,
So you were like way into music.
still way into music.
Yeah.
And again, I think sometimes of this weird journey and the opportunities. Now, along my journey, I've traveled with Rush. I've traveled along with a Hall of Fame rock band. You can have anything you want on a rock tour. I don't necessarily know if that's healthy, but it's a pretty wild experience. But back in 2000 and I'm going to say around 4, living down here now, working down here, my musical experience is starting to move. Bought myself some really nice guitars, having some fun. And my dad has a friend up in Edmonton. He has this picture of B.B. King. Dad makes a comment to him. He says, well, my sister knows B.B. King. That really doesn't make a lot of sense for this friend of my dad. But Dad's like, well, really confused as to why that'd be. And this friend of my dad's explains to him that back in the 70s, his sister, his friend's sister, was trying to get away from a boyfriend at the time. And she ducks into Blues on White. And there's a row of fellas there, and they said, looks like you're having a difficult time here. Come have a seat with us. It's B.B. King and the band. They become instant friends. So this friend of my dad says, listen, do you want to meet him, George? And my dad says no, but he says, my son Ross, the only artist he's ever wanted to meet was B.B. King. I've made the pilgrimages down to Memphis many times. I've been to Elvis's Graceland, and Beale Street had this touch for me. And so Frank says, well, just come to the next concert in Edmonton. Come back and meet him. Yeah, not sure if it's that easy. So there we are at the concert. Bring my nephews, got my brother, bring my dad. Up we go. Book a hotel room because I'm living down here at the time. And B.B. King stops the show halfway through. I'm thinking, there's no chance I'm going to meet this man. And he says, I'm 80 some years old now. I just want to say thanks to the people who have been around for the journey of my life. And he thanks this woman, Frank's sister. Well, there's a really good chance that I'm going to meet him. So as soon as the show ends, run back sort of at the backstage area, and I'm excited. I've been trying to think for months what I would ever ask him. And my question, I forgot to ask. But I run out to my truck, and I rush back. Somebody opens the door, and they said, if your name's not on this list, you're not meeting B.B. King. There's no point sticking around. And at my tender age, I'm looking around going, there's Edmonton's number one DJ. There's all these other people. There's probably got to be 50 people standing back here. I'm not on that list, but let's see what happens. So I'm standing there with my guitar. 10 minutes later, the door opens up. Hey, where's the kid with the guitar? Grab my brother, grab my nephews. My dad's like, listen, you go in. I'll wait outside here. In we go. Now, the question I wanted to ask B.B. King was, what was it like to play for that many popes? Because somebody who had an experience to do something different. I wanted to try and figure out a question that somebody else may not have asked him. I was so excited to be behind the scenes in my first green room, forgot to ask him. But he looks at my guitar and he says, are you left-handed or right-handed? I was starting to, I almost forgot. I'm like, well, I'm a right-handed guitar. So he signs his name. It's beautiful to it. Visit, chat for a little while, have this most amazing experience of being backstage with B.B. King. Head back to the hotel. The crazy thing is, they're staying at the same hotel. I get back there, whole band is there. And I said, well, does Mr. King come back here as well? He said, yeah, he'll probably be along here about 20, 30 minutes. So I'm having an opportunity at the bar to visit with some of the band members, visit with all the crew. I run up to my room. I come back downstairs, and here comes the tour bus. B.B. King gets off, starts coming in. I said to him, sir, I don't know if you remember me. And he looks and he goes, oh yeah, I just saw you backstage. I said, but would you sign this picture for me? He takes a look at it, give him the Sharpie, B.B. King. And as he goes away, somebody's standing over my shoulder, and he goes, Memphis. Doesn't mean anything to me. Memphis. So I start to look, and he goes, Memphis. I said, sorry? And he goes, you got that picture in Memphis, Tennessee, didn't you? I said, as a matter of fact, I did. He goes, you got that picture at a little poster shop on the end of Beale Street in Memphis, Tennessee. And I said, that's exactly where I got it. He goes, that's $5,000. And the reason why is it's a poster that's unavailable anywhere else. It's a Carl Wertheimer picture of B.B. King and Elvis in 1957 standing on Beale Street. And I've got that picture. And when I went back and told the guys I was playing music with at that time this story, they looked at me and they said, Memphis. And I never thought about. Now I've moved on with my life in bands. I'm playing with guys now who are 40-year musicians, celebrities here in Calgary. And they wanted to build a band, and they understood I'd been playing, hitting here and there. They said, we're going to make a look, and it's going to be country rock. It's going to be our stuff. They knew I was writing music. You know, they've heard the story of me running into Sarah McLachlan on Inglewood and such like that. And I said to Sarah one time, she was coming out of the record store, and I'm confident because I'm an Army brat. I said, Sarah, she turns around. I said, I'm just a burgeoning songwriter, trying to get my music out there, hoping she'll take one of my songs. And I said, what's my next step? She said, you put a band together and you go out and play your music. That's all I needed to hear. Mm-hmm. She didn't have to say anything else. She smiled, turned with her handler, and off she went.
How old are you?
I'm going to say probably about 28.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I've been playing for a little while, but been writing for a while, having opportunities around town. And then through these years, then I started building another band. And the guys that I'm playing with now that have been established for a while said, you know what? I said, I don't want this to be about me. That's not how I've ever lived my life. I just surround myself with the best people who I love being around. And they said, yeah, we understand that, but it's got to be about you at some point because you're the lead singer. And people want to identify with that. And they go, how about if we call it Memphis and we went through a list, a whole bunch of things. And what ended up sticking was my guitar player, Kinger, who's a songwriter with me. He said, how about Grand? But he says, because we kind of want to make it country, Grande, kind of like that Southwestern thing, Memphis and the Grand. Well, I work in the world of artificial intelligence. Sadly now, when you type in and say, look up Memphis, AI has described it as Memphis and the Grande. So the first time we ended up on the radio, first time we got our songs out on the radio, all of the DJs would say Memphis and the Grande. Well, then that's it. It's not Memphis and the Grand. So that idea of my relationship, having met B.B. King, having shared that, there was not something I ever shared with people. I didn't tell people my nickname is Memphis. My stage name as an actor came because now I have a TV show coming out. And the directors that I've worked with are like, no, you are. Like, we want that. And I had a band member who looked at me one time. He said, Ross, I've been in the arts for a long time. You're the only guy I've ever met that could pull that name off. That was the biggest, kindest thing anybody had ever said to me. That these opportunities, these collisions, these experiences, that all of a sudden that I could own that. And it's not something that I run around still telling firemen and go, well, hey, call me this. No, these are the weirdest things that happen. But now that I have a show on TV called Red River Gold, and I get to be me, I get to still be the authentic me. They said, we're not asking you to be a character, just actually kind of be yourself. You already wear wonderfully emblazoned, the Louis Riel look. You wear your cowboy hat. You got cowboy boots on. You lead people. No, there's something I learned a long time ago, and something that my dad had taught me, other soldiers had taught me. The world doesn't need to create more followers. They need to create more leaders. So my job all the time is to give everybody every tool there is, every opportunity there is, every chance to make a mistake, but learn from it and become the best leader that they can. So when I'm in my band, I'm the lead singer of that, but it's not me. If the band wasn't behind me, when it comes to the work that I do, environmental monitoring, if I didn't have the people who were brilliant behind me, when it comes to the Indigenous community, if I didn't have people coming up to me saying, how can we get involved more? I occasionally speak at high schools. Now, again, I mentioned I was just in New York and I'm in Ottawa, speaking to all the biggest government agencies, all the big universities. I get so many talks. And somebody will say, well, you spoke at a high school recently. Why would you do that? Because they asked. Sometimes life doesn't have to be more than that. You're doing more for truth and reconciliation in the community by offering me the chance to be here, to allow me the chance to wear some symbols that represent my community, to share in my story, than some of the biggest companies out there that go, well, we know the 94 calls to action. We're trying to get through 15 of them. Uh-huh. I've heard some of your calls to action. A lot of times I'll show up and somebody will go, okay, in our land acknowledgement, we'd like to thank the Anishinaabe. I'm never too harsh with people. I'll go up to them after and say, you might want to correct that in the future. I'm like, well, why is that? I go, the Anishinaabe are 3,000 kilometers that way. I'll let them know you care, though. Why don't we think about the people around here? And so, when we have people who are comfortable and have the opportunity, I always want to move in a positive direction in all my conversations, because life is hard out there. Why don't we move positively? So to be sitting here with you, having you ask wonderful questions, by listening, this is opening the world for so many of the youth that I say, take the time to listen, but also take the time to ask questions. I want to share something with you that, and I think, your family will understand this. This was something I didn't understand. I think a lot of the Humphreys, if you ever ask them, they would understand it now. My dad has a chest full of medals. And he was a soldier. It took me a long time to ever ask him what all of them meant or where they came from. And in these last years, as I've had every opportunity, I'm really enjoying it. So here I've had uniforms on now for 25 years of my life. And I was just in we call them the number 3 uniform, just our standard wear. And this young fella comes up to me. He's about 14, 15 years old. Just doing what I do as a fireman, standing around. And I'm an officer now. I'm early in my officer experience. And he says, so what do you do? And I get that question a lot, right? I'm like, well, we put out fires, help kids and fall off bikes and car accidents. He's like, yeah, but what do you really do? Second question. Usually doesn't happen. I said, well, we inspect businesses, we test fire hydrants, we participate in education. We have a huge public information sort of system of course. What do you really do? I'd never been asked that. So often I deflect that. But I have this young person asking me this question. And I honestly had to think about it for a second. I'd only been a captain for, at that time, maybe a couple of years. I'd been a lieutenant for a while. And I thought, you can't lie to kids. It's not how this works. I paused and I looked at him and I said, you know what I do? I said, I make calculated decisions within seconds, send people into harm's way to save somebody else's life. And I have to live with the consequences of my decisions. And my heart almost skipped a beat after saying it. And this kid looks at me and he goes, yeah, I could never do that.
You little shit.
It was right then that I understood why the city of Calgary, why the province of Alberta gave me medals. I didn't understand it before. I thought if you stick around long enough, that's it. And I think of all the people who have come before me as in the world of service and my father. Now I understood what it meant. And when I started to attend Indigenous events, hired as an MC or I talk in Ottawa, or I talk usually more about artificial intelligence, but that's not always the case. I get hired by the biggest technology companies now in the world to ask me about the Indigenous journey, to ask me about what it's like in the sense of minority. And I wear these medals with pride, with a pride that I didn't understand. That question came from a 15-year-old who opened up my journey, my experience. And now when I participate singing the anthem or doing things with my father, I stand there proud wearing my medals. I didn't understand that. And I don't know if it was because I didn't know how to listen to my dad. Maybe he did try to explain it at the time, but sometimes you have to learn it. You have to learn it for yourself. And that's a big part of the nature of the journey.
It's timing though too, right?
Yeah.
Like when you said you hadn't asked your dad about the medals, there's a reason you didn't.
Yeah.
And whether that's the hierarchy of like father son,
yeah,
and if it's too far apart, like there's some places you just don't go.
Yeah.
And so whatever the
maybe
time,
I was always afraid of hearing the answer too, in the sense that old soldiers have old wounds.
Yeah.
And I'm now 51 and 25 years as an officer. Some of those wounds I understand where they come from. But my spirit is strengthened when it comes to communication, when I talk to people. I have so many people who now come to me and they understand. I think it's because I was a nurse and I'm willing to listen all the time. And they'll approach me and say, well, they're telling me their challenges and the struggles that they're facing. And I said, I don't get joy from hearing the struggles you face. But what it does is it reminds me that we all struggle. And that comes back to the humanity. We all are facing challenges. It's just a different challenge for the next person. But in my experience, when I finally heard that, when I finally admitted to somebody else, life's hard sometimes. We see hard, dangerous things. We hear it struggle. When we can talk about it and we realize we're the same as everybody else, that was grounding for me. So where did I search for some of those groundings? I found them in my relationships in the fire department. I found them in relationships with my wife, being honest with her about, sometimes my job is hard. When it comes to connection with my community and allowing my spirit to come out, focusing on environment, Mother Earth, and trying to give back in so many different ways, I feel like I'm blessed every day. I am living my best life. And when somebody comes up to me after one of my international, or my national, or my local talks where there's 1,000 people, and the spirit, somebody comes up to me and says, how is that? How are you living your authentic, you're living your best life? That's the question you got to ask yourself. What aren't you doing? Are you stuck in a rut? What is you not finding as a challenge? So now you think about all these intersections that were happening and opportunities and the door of potentially joining the Speakers Bureau of Canada and being around so many people that I always feel like an imposter. I always feel like I am still trying to stay advanced. I thought I need to learn for myself. So I'm going to take classes at Harvard and MIT because they were the only ones offering the advanced artificial intelligence that I was interested in, the business in machine learning and artificial intelligence.
Before you go there, how the hell do you get into like AI stuff? Because obviously things present themselves to you and either you have the experience or the interest, whether it's, because I'm going to go back to this, when you're on shift, you're around a certain group of individuals and there's all sorts. There's pro athletes.
Yes.
There's like dorks. There's like introverts. Actually, it's a melting pot. And I've been around enough halls and I've heard enough stories. These the music thing, it's always been there. You spin up a business, the occupational one, the AI thing, and then wanting to go down this path of like, just, taking classes to go way in. Like, where does that come from? Like, where does that
drive?
Well, and it's a bit of a, it's not a,
that's a pivot.
Yeah. It's like a left field pivot. Like, what was it that put you on that path to actually go looking to do this research and get knowledge?
So the occupational health company, we developed some software, and some of the people I worked with
for efficiencies or just to like
advanced sort of research strategies.
Okay.
How can we come up with better solutions to understand risk?
Yeah.
And these were the newest advanced tools. So the software was finding a niche. In this case, it was mostly around hearing.
Yeah. Finding
a niche where you could look for measurables. Well, once we sold that, and once one of the partners in the conversation I was working with, he said, well, imagine this, he's a firefighter as well, and works in the world of the understanding the risk of indices towards environmental threats. Again, I'm Indigenous, and I've been around the idea of cultural burning and understanding how we protect our communities. It's a big conversation. And he said, there's a gap in environmental sciences. And I said, well, can you just explain that to me? Because now we've been building tools together. What is this gap? And it's a wildfire gap. It's using the absolute highest level of data that we pull down from satellites or machine learning through drone technology, and managing this data. So I'm a member of the European Space Agency. I buy data from NASA if I need to. I will get data from whoever is providing the absolute best. So when emeritus's of universities who are friends of mine are like, how many competitors you got out there? Well, I said, all you got to know is machine learning, advanced artificial intelligence, and I'll talk a little bit about that, all the risks when it comes to wildfires, how to put the data together in your own algorithms, and own a company. If you have those 5 things, you're a competitor all day long. And they usually laugh. Again, you surround yourself with people who have certain aspects of computer knowledge base, and things flow. And I said, well, tell you what, I can get us money. Reached out to the government saying, I found a gap. They said, you did find a gap. Yeah, explore it. Built a relationship with one of the universities and said, we'd love to partner with you in the science. We're all over it. So the next thing you know, we are coming up and developing algorithms that, imagine you have a house right in the middle of a little forest. I can tell you which side of the house will start to burn down first. So now think about it in a community. That's the role. That's the idea of how do you protect communities from wildfires. We just lost the Ukrainian Cultural Center the other day up in Edmonton. A lot of people just presume it's never going to happen to them.
Yeah.
The climate's changing. But to understand more about how we're moving forward, how I was going to move this company forward, I needed to understand it more. There's not a lot of places out there. There's a lot of places offering computer courses, computer science courses, but how to understand the business implications and the applications of artificial intelligence. The only places that I could find that were really great opportunities were Harvard and MIT. But my focus, big part of my focus when it came to talking about it, because the Speakers Bureau said, you're an amazing talker, great speaker, knowledge keeper when it comes to the Indigenous communities. What else could you talk about? I said, well, I own this company over here and we do artificial intelligence, machine learning to protect environmental concerns regarding Earth observation and hyperspectral and monitoring. Could you talk about that? And I said, well, as a matter of fact, I could. So I got, the opportunity to be picked up. And then my focus became bias and fairness. And the reason I wanted the focus to become bias and fairness was there are so many underrepresented populations. I can use the term minority, but that's not a strong enough term. Underrepresented in the sense of everybody in the LGBTQ spectrum. If the data you're using is limited to data that is kind of historic, most people aren't represented.
Yeah.
That's where the bias comes in. So how do we come up with strategies for fairness? Well, as a result of the fact that this is the things that I talk about, everybody in the woodwork started coming out going, well, can you talk to governments? Yeah, I'm fly around and talk to. Can you talk to the different agencies regarding construction or civil, or could you talk to healthcare? Yeah, bias and the fairness is at a risk everywhere. People go, well, you were a nurse before. You have an amazing ability to understand the aspect of healthcare. Sure, I do, I think, yeah. You're Indigenous, so you understand the risks of them. Well, yeah, I'm still on this journey myself, understand that. But you also, the collision. The only real people who haven't called me is some of the musicians, but I'm sure we'll get there. What I get from them are, how do we protect the jobs and the opportunities? And I use this term, what's called the peak of inflated expectation. People are exploring the chat GPTs. They're exploring the generative pre-trained transformers out there. They're trying to experience them. For a while there, if you weren't using these, you weren't in the world. You were off this world. The novelty's kind of wearing out. If there's not an authentic connection, folks, just to remind you, Jeff Humphreys is not AI. This is not a robot.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Got to scale this thing somehow.
I should pinch you just to make sure you're actually real. The people want to understand that there's also that we face challenges. I've got wonderful stories of mistakes that I've made, and I love them because they humanize me. They remind me I'm no different than anybody else. I don't want to see people fail. What I want to see is that they accept that we all make mistakes and we're human because of it. And so this opportunity to talk about art, to study, but what I found was by taking these courses, the challenge, the mental challenge, I don't want to fail these. I've never wanted to fail exam. Lord knows I failed enough of them growing up, but I never wanted to fail these. Now these are the things that I'm paying money for. These are expensive courses. your mind, at this time, I'm like 47, 48.
Which is, it's a,
Most people aren't doing it.
well, it's an interesting time to like, for that kind of intensity around learning, right?
To reinvent, to pivot, to go down the left field, like you said. But because I was doing that, and pat myself on the back for this one, I'm a little over 4 years into Duolingo German because, of course, I was born in Germany. But German was getting easier because my brain was learning again. My conversational German was better. My songwriting was better. I found I needed the creative outlet because my academic mind was learning so much.
Yep.
Our mind said, just give me a little break. Help me over here. Let's have some fun over here. Let's find joy over here. So this brain of mine was all of a sudden enjoying everything. I could understand the stresses that I'd been facing in my life and could admit to them easier. I talked to my wife about them. And I go, the only thing I don't want to do is fail this course. But you know what? It's just a course. What I don't want to fail is our relationship. I want to be successful in the relationships that I have with my family, with my nieces and nephews, and enjoy the experience. And as I would talk to old men, and I'd say, well, where'd you go to school? And they'd always say, oh, they went to some Ivy League school back in the 70s or 80s. I'm like, no, where have you been to school in the last 20 years? And I came to realize, never stop learning. And that eventually became the tagline, always be learning. But for me, I still am. I was taking courses out of Helsinki, and I don't always have the time. But when I can make the time, I know how good that learning feels. And having parents who are elderly now, they're always, oh, well, I'm kind of losing my mind. Sure. But you know, there are other things we could do to continue to build and learn. And so then the opportunity to live in a world of artificial intelligence opened up, and everybody said, do you mind coming to talk to us? Next thing you know, I'm on speakers tours. But people don't just want to understand that. They ask the same questions that, not as well as you, but they ask them in a way that says, but how did you get there? What was the motivation? It's not an intrinsic motivation like our gold medal athletes, who I know no shortage of, who started out and they reached a finite time in their career where they said, this is the pinnacle, and it's very hard to get back there again. And some do, and we celebrate them. The human mind has a capacity for the motion, for the knowledge to always grow and to learn and share the emotion in those experiences. And a lot of people are just afraid to do it. And I encourage them, why not take the class? What's the worst that's going to happen? Make it ballroom dancing. Your mind is still learning. Think of the great experience that you get from it.
Learning can happen in a bunch of different ways, right? Courses, school, which I dislike both of those. But learning can actually also happen through experiences, right? Which means like putting yourself in a position to experience something different.
Yeah.
Which is like this environment, right?
Yeah.
So for me, as you're talking, I'm like, oh, how the fuck am I learning? Am I still learning? So, you know.
Yeah.
And so for me, when I deconstruct this environment, this is my learning, right? A, how to set this thing up. B, how to keep the thing going. And then my learning is sitting down with interesting characters like yourself, right? That's a different way to learn, which is, again, it's the same idea. It's just a different way.
I've watched enough of your talks and have met enough people who have talked about you that if you weren't authentic, we wouldn't be sitting here.
Yeah.
Because if I just needed a sounding board, I just talk to some social media and walk away. But that doesn't connect us, right? When I trust you, I trust that, you know, you're building a brand that is because it's a positive experience for you. And I want that. I'm the luckiest guy in the world to be sitting here that you chose to have a conversation with me. I'm only one of 166 so far. You do the math on it. In fact, you can't even do the math on that. I don't even think AI could do the math on what the percentage is. But so for the opportunity, and I could hear blow smoke if you really need me to, but it sounds like you got enough family history that blowing smoke, you know there's no fire there.
Exactly. How do you balance the full-time job with all the multiple other things you're interested in? Where do you, and the word balance might not be the right thing. Maybe there is no balance. Maybe it's just this continual push forward in this like chaos that's like somewhat controlled. How do you, when you introduce yourself and it's like and all these things, right? That I'm sure that the listeners like, how do you balance it all?
Well, we all have a certain amount of holiday time. There's opportunities in careers working for departments like the City of Calgary that there's opportunities for sabbaticals, things like that. We have to choose. Now, I don't have kids, but I'm a tolerable uncle, I would sort of suggest.
Me too.
So I have lots of nieces and nephews. Mm-hmm. And so somebody will say to me, well, how did you have time to take that course? Well, everybody I know who has 2 kids just spent 16 hours that weekend in a hockey rink, swimming pool, dance class. And I go, folks, I use that opportunity to do this. My band doesn't play every day.
Yeah.
But when we play, we're all established enough now that we have a certain amount of practice. But the expectation when you're a professional is you're practicing so that when you get there, you're ready to go. Yeah. When it comes to filming the TV show, you would think when you watch a TV show that was an entire year of slogging through it. No, it was about 3 weeks. And we got most of it done, maybe 4 weeks sometimes. Yeah. But are the stories authentic? Yes. Is that the message that I'm trying to get when it comes to Red River Gold? Yes. Telling great stories of lost treasure gold. When it comes to, so that sort of covers the studying, the opportunities when it comes to relationships. What's the balance in our relationships? Well, I think my wife does an amazing job of ensuring she volunteers and commits her time to relationships and friendships and things that we always find a balance for each other. And when we have our opportunity, when I'm not giving a talk, I'm traveling. And for speaking, it's exhausting to be a keynote speaker. I will put 20 to 60 hours into a talk. I can only do that 2 to 4 times a month because I'm worn out. Mm-hmm. A lot of my talks can be sort of built on each other, but when I want them to be authentic, they take time. And so somebody says, well, again, where do you find that time? I'm no different than you. Instead of sitting and watching Netflix at night, I actually write a little bit, or I study, or nowadays I audition for a lot of shows because I'm in a break between, shooting of mine. Where we choose to spend our time, where we choose to spend our money, where we choose to spend our energy, we're living in a most beautiful country that allows for that. Choose you, right? That's what I tell somebody. And sometimes choosing you means choosing your family because that's where you get your strength from. But if the other opportunity is instead of watching Netflix, read a book. I'm learning now from the kids that I talk to and the experience that I get. Kids are going, you know what? Playing video games isn't as much fun anymore. They're starting to play board games again. So I go back to that peak of inflated expectations. But video games, yeah, but there's no human touch there. Our youth, don't know what the opposite sex smells like because they didn't actually get to spend any time with each other. But now they're getting back to realizing that the connection is what strengthens us. I always tell people, AI doesn't care about you, not one bit. Doesn't think about you at all. So don't presume in any way that is something that wants to help you change your life. You've got to change your life.
The speaking piece, was it just this like natural progression of kind of who you were, whether it's like understanding leadership, being a front man in a band? Like, was it just these like things that you're like, I feel like I got this? Or was it this like huge departure? And, the way you present yourself, well-spoken, thoughtful, and you got the radio voice. Did you always know this? And so when this opportunity presented yourself, you're like, this isn't a stretch. Like, this is something that I got.
I love how you asked it. I'd like to say it was just as easy as, well, sure, be on a stage and I'll just walk up there. Gord, with the CEO of the Speakers Bureau, had asked me, and he knows no shortage of speakers. And he said, Ross, do you ever get nervous? I have kids who ask me, do you ever get nervous? And I said, here's something I've learned from being a fireman for a long time, from working with people, from understanding the every aspect, what I feel of is fear. I said, the difference between being nervous and excited is only in the spelling. It's the same feeling. But when you cling to the nervous, it has a different connotation. It's like, well, then I'm not prepared.
Yeah.
If you're knowledgeable, you're already prepared. Be excited. And I tell that to kids before you're going to go up on stage. And I've led so many kids onto stage to have opportunities like the Dragon's Den. It's called the Beaver's Den. So many kids come up, talk about their little business. They're all terrified. And I explained to them, you don't think I'm nervous? When I said to Gord, and he said to that question, he goes, are you ever nervous going up there? I practice a certain type of combat breathing. Dad had talked about it when I was growing up. You will breathe in for 4 seconds. In fact, I'd love your audience to do it. In fact, you should do it too. You breathe in for 4 seconds, you hold it for 8 seconds, and you breathe out. Every time I get on a fire truck, I never let anybody see me do it, but that's exactly what I do. And they all go, you never look like you're nervous. That's my job. My job is to never look like there's ever going to be a problem, ever. So when I go to walk up on stage, big stages, thousands of people out there, and I breathe until I take that last step. And then as soon as I take that last step, the smile comes on and I realize that's what I've been training for. That's the part. Is a lot of it on me? Yeah. It has been a journey of being an entertainer. I'm sure that's built part of it. But when people want to experience your journey, and if you have knowledge, and that knowledge can be from anywhere, from having been taught how to dance, from how to speak a different language, to being in a spelling bee, which means you've done way better than me, to teaching about podcasts. People want to learn from that. So the only thing that's different is instead of being nervous, be excited. And then when you walk up on that stage, they all want you there. Nobody's going to throw anything at you. So that's your opportunity. People will often ask me about my voice. I said, well, I've been singing for a long time. I have to work at curating certain songs for myself, for my band that sound a certain way. Yeah. I've lived all over Canada. Again, I joke, as I commented earlier, when I'm on the East, I'll say that's some good. When I'm on the West, I'll say that's damn good. And sometimes how I'm trying to find the phrasing and things, I get a little bit confused because möchten du dieses Treffen in Deutsch? We could do a little bit of this in German if you want. But German, the second verb comes at the end. So when people go, well, you speak in English long enough, yeah, but I'm spending most of my time also trying to figure out how to speak German. And so I will make mistakes. How do we make mistakes in our own language? But yeah. And so this voice is so generous and kind when somebody says, this is one of my favorite ones. They go, you sound like a storyteller. Well, that's the reason I'm searching for gold too. That's the reason this is the voice that you hear in the title song of our show, Red River Gold. This is the voice that I've celebrated because when my dad sings, he sounds a little like me. Though he came to my 50th last year. The band loves to play with him because he's an old man. And up there's my dad, whole bunch, probably 100 people in the room, such like that. And my dad starts off this statement. He goes, my son's not a singer. I thought, well, that's not where I thought this was going to head. He goes, he's an entertainer. I don't know, Dad. I kind of thought I was also a singer too. I understood what he was trying to suggest, but yeah.
Thanks, Dad.
Yeah. None of this singing voice came from my mom. She'll point that out, actually, quite frequently. So,
do you give much thought to how this is all connected? Like, do you sit back and ever connect all these dots of like different experiences and the progressions and the pivots and the lefts and like how they're actually all connected? And from the outside, when you started like introducing yourself, I'm like, fucking left field, like, because there's no context behind it.
Yeah.
Do you ever, or do you just naturally understand it's all connected and that these opportunities that keep presenting themselves, it's just as like this natural, organic evolution to everything?
I don't think, apart from this and now on this journey, that I've looked back that deep yet. what I found was when I hit 30, I had this drive, just kicking tires. I'm going to keep doing this. I got to keep driving. Then when I hit 40, I'm like, you know what? I'm doing all right. I'm pretty happy. I feel like I've reached a success where I'm starting to at least understand, to be comfortable with who I am, accept the journey that I'm on. And actually, in the end, when I realized there are times in our lives when we've been in careers for 15 years, we don't learn as much. We don't learn the same way. Not as many things can change.
Yep.
Fires go out, and we need those people to step up to continue to do that work. But the arc of that career doesn't change as much as it did. And yes, there's different routes that you can go. As you know, you meet different chiefs, you can do this. But that's not where I needed to be. I always wanted to be a captain. Because there was Captain Picard, there was Captain Kirk, there was Captain Maverick. Those were the people that I always emulated. So to go up to be the next level really didn't concern me.
Yep.
So I thought, I'm not challenging myself enough. That's the reason I went down these career paths. And I think there will be a time. And in fact, just sitting here, you know, in having the conversation, I started to reflect on things through how you do it, but in your questions. But it wasn't something that I spent too much time doing. And I think at some point I will. But I gave a talk to these millionaires and billionaires recently. And one of the gentlemen said, you ever hear about Carl Lewis? And I hadn't thought about it. I thought they were the American runner. And he said, when they asked Carl Lewis how he was so successful as a runner, he said he didn't look to the 100-yard mark. He looked 10 yards past it. Because if your dad died at 80 years old, don't live your life like you're going to die at 80. Keep looking long past that. So for me, I haven't had a reason that I want to spend the time looking back. It's how do we build as we go forward? And I laugh because I always feel like an imposter. Every one of these things I go, well, how am I the guy here? How am I the guy flown to Ottawa to talk to these big establishments? And somebody goes, well, you're comfortable with it. You were willing to step up and take the risk. And when somebody says, well, I think this guy's a clown, you're willing to put the makeup on and accept that. Well, at this time, I'm still very comfortable. But am I often humbled? Oh, goodness, yes. I played a show a couple of years ago, playing a country show, and there's no shortage of people in the crowd, all dancing, they're playing, singing, we're having a great time. And I started playing a song. I just watched everybody walk off. And at the end of it, I said, folks, I didn't think you were going to walk off to Tina Turner. And it was Tina Turner's Nutbush. I thought I killed that song.
Yeah.
But before I went up, my wife said, I know what's on your song list. I don't know if I play that song. Oh, no, this song's going to kill. No. Wrong answer. They walked up and I was humbled. And those are the great experiences. Those are the ones that remind us it doesn't always go exactly as you want. But if you're willing to continue to just put, that foot forward and join and participate, you're going to have a better enjoyment of the celebration than if you do nothing. So I don't know, when I hit 50, I thought, I'm not ready to slow down. Most of the people I knew are like, oh, I'm so close to retirement. I can't wait to just get out there and hit the ball every day. Hey, I'm happy for you. And maybe someday I'll get there. But for me, it's continually learning and having the youth come up to me and having the elders and having the seniors. Now, when somebody says, can you see the forest through the trees? I didn't understand that cliche at 30, at 40, at 50. Now I understand what they mean. And it's okay to accept your age a little bit. And I laugh. I had a kid come up to me. I was emceeing a big festival. And afterwards he goes, well, we need to get people like you and I together more and celebrate these things more. And he goes, I said, sorry, what are you referring to? He goes, people our age. I said, out of curiosity, how old do you think I am? He goes, well, 35. I said, I'm 50. And he goes, well, you look good for 50. And I don't know, maybe that's the Métis skin, I guess. I don't know. But when you want to be an actor, you have to work at it a little bit. These are part of it, but I choose that. And that's the amazing thing. So when do we look back? When do we slow down? When do we accept that I'm at the finish line or stop looking past it? I hope I don't find it. But a funny thing, I go back to my health comment a little earlier. And I'm talking to this billionaire, sold his company for $3.2 billion. And I said, can I ask you a question? And he said, yeah. Still got to get up in the middle of the night to go to the washroom? Yeah. Huh. I said, so money's not, the answer to everything. We better have a good night's sleep. And he thought about it afterwards. And the guy's been asked every business question in the world out there. I was just curious about the human condition. Mm-hmm. He's a very successful man. He's a wonderful man. He's done very well. And I was curious about that. And yeah, it all goes back to our health. Yeah. And how do we find the strength? It's not just the physical health. It's the emotional health. Mm. I hope that you, after this conversation, you get a chance to go back to the rest of the Humphreys and go, so I ran into this guy.
Fucking guy came on the show.
This guy. Who does this guy think he is? And what do you think of him? Yeah. And when they go, you know what? Everybody speaks highly of him. That's it. Yeah. That's all I've ever asked for, right? That's all I've ever hoped for.
The TV show is like a weird, unique opportunity.
Yeah.
Knowing your background, learning about your background. How do you do anything? Do you put energy into the universe? Do you think about things? Do you get into conversations and like something then happens? Like, how do you push forward and create organic opportunities? Are you very thoughtful about it? Or does the TV thing just like randomly?
No, that's a very special question. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to say it's a unique answer, but for me, what it's been is when anybody in my Métis or Indigenous or city or community or somebody comes up to me and says, hey, you're a pretty good singer. Do you mind singing the anthem here? Happy to. There's times in the past I used to sing the American national anthem because there'd be things going on up here that the Americans would come up saying, we're doing some big event. Can you come and sing here both anthems? Yeah, I'm happy to do it, right? So when somebody says, can you participate in your community? How would you like me to participate? There's only so much for me to go around. Can you MC? Yeah. Can you play guitar sometimes? Do that. Learning fiddle. Can you learn these things? Can you help us out in these ways? Yeah. And every one of those new touch points becomes a relationship. And that's the word. That's if we've answered anything today, it's relationships. And so I come across this director. To me, now that I've been an actor for a while, I didn't, you'd watch celebrity shows and you'd watch the Oscars and think, I'd like to thank this producer director. Who? Whatever. Never anybody paid attention. Now I have to thank them. I've realized I've got premieres coming up, and when people ask me, well, how and why, this friend of mine, Saxon DeCock, he's a Calgary guy, he's Métis. He's a wonderful man. He's had his own journey. Very successful in his world now of film and television for thousands of shows. In fact, he's the host of a show called Treaty Road, telling an Indigenous story of all the treaties. But he's Métis. But like me, when we had an experience to work together, because I do music festivals when I was participating, and he was one of the directors. And he said, Ross, you're really good at what you do. Well, I don't know. I'm just here to be authentic and have a good time. That's honestly really what I'm here. This is my Saturday night. And so when he came to me with the TV show, I said, Saxon, both you and I have often felt like imposters because joining the Métis community, and he's Métis, and he wanted to tell authentic stories. And he said, you're familiar with it, Ross. There's a history most people don't know about. 400 ounces of gold that was being shipped from the UK to Canada to put down Louis Riel in the Red River Resistance. He said, you want to find that gold? So let me get this straight. We filmed a podcast together. We worked on music things together. We worked on some festival things together. And you came up with this idea, and we've now worked together for a few years. Not somebody I grew up, not something I was ever chasing. And he goes, yeah. He goes, you just got to look like you do when it comes to being the country star you are and lead people. That's your job. I will find all the experts to do the rest of the work. And we did. The next thing you know, I'm living in what I like to call Los Angeles of the North, Winnipeg, and getting bit by everything that lives in Winnipeg. But now I'm searching for gold. And for one entire season, for months, back and forth in the wintertime, in the summertime, and every opportunity that I could go, we're back and we're filming this TV show. And just on pretty much the last day in January, and we're talking about wrapping the season up, and I'm standing there all bundled up, and it's -40, and I'm by a hole that we just dug up, and the whole crew's there, and all the film and everything. And I walked up and I go, I never thought I'd be an actor. And he laughed. He's like, well, I get that. He says, but you realize for the last 12 months, you've searched for gold this whole time, digging holes, doing everything, leading people, coming up very straight. He goes, you know what that makes you? A gold hunter. And I nearly fell over. I'm like, I'm not just an actor. And as authentic as our scenes are, because there's so much truth to it and so much, my job is to interview people on the show, but there's I'm the storyteller. Mm-hmm. The other people are the adventurers. The other people are the experts. My job is to keep the team driving. And I'm like, much to your question, I go, how did I end up here? Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden somebody on the crew goes, you know, you're really good, Ross. Sarah, I think, well, I appreciate that. I'm just having the time of my life. I've been an entertainer a long time. I've been a musician. I know where to stand. I know how to stand. I know how the audience can see me. Again, I've traveled along with Rush. I know my job of making sure that people can see the artists. I've seen all this. And she goes, yeah, but do you want to do this more? Because I'd love to put you in contact. Now the next thing you know, I got an acting agent. And she loves me and goes, you are really good. I'm like, but never turn something down that gives you joy. Mm. But also realize there's only so much of us to go around. Yeah. I know you and I could probably sit here for 8 hours. There's only so much Jeff Humphreys. There's so much work. But I tell everybody, after every talk, after every experience, anybody in the world can have 20 minutes of my time. Mm-hmm. But there's in an 8-hour day, there's only 24 of those 20 minutes. And I still got to eat. I still got to do this. So I really only got about 16, plus my nap. So I got about 15. So when you take up one of those 15, after 20 minutes, if I didn't give you your answer, then I don't know what else to do for you right away. But so many times I'll have kids call me going, I just want to figure out how to become a musician. Let me give you a few directions, some ideas on how to, and I'll often throw out Sarah McLachlan's quote, and I'll say, this is what I learned from people higher than me, and be authentic. Don't try and do something that you're not comfortable with, and don't do it if you don't want to do it. Participate in it. That's the fun. Mm-hmm.
I love how you answer it by relationships. Because it's those like, because I don't know when you first met this person, the director guy, but I'm sure it was years ago.
And actually, a few years ago now, yeah.
And so it's like there's little seeds planted that you have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But if you turn up every time authentic, you're a good person, present yourself well, you know, like you have no idea what that turns into.
Yeah.
It's vague.
Yeah.
But when people see you, like, why is this guy? Why did he get the gig? Because I did these things. Good person, showed up, I can speak, and there's the opportunity. I'm just here.
And I think I look at, to me, so many, and I call them celebrities. I call them celebrities because I've seen the people on your podcast who are game changers in our community. They are the ones to participate. There's a TV show out there called Legacy Makers that I was on, and I said, I don't think I'm the person you're looking for. And Jacqueline Bill and Daryl Jan said, no, you're exactly who we're looking for. And I said, but I don't feel like I've been, I don't need that accolade. I didn't earn it. And they go, this is what we've learned about you. What would you call it? I'm like, so the next thing you know, I'm on this wonderful show and I'm meeting Daryl Jans, who's been an idol of my wife, who was Calgary born and raised girl.
Yeah.
You know, we lost a huge man in the industry. And so there's this show about me. I'm like, well, I guess I am making changes in people's lives. And is that not what I always wanted to do? And that's exactly it. And every one of these relationships, Saxon could have hired anybody else. But I said, well, and who do you want me to be for this? He said, honestly, you don't need to be anybody but yourself. Is some of the show when I will make a comment about how far I could throw a porcupine? Yeah, I don't normally do that, but it's on the show because it sort of fits the experience.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's those relationships. And if you participate in every one, that you can,
Mm-hmm.
that somebody sees the joy and they get the joy, they get the experience as well. And they want to see you in there. So when Gord said, Ross, you do a lot for us in the Speakers Bureau because you're willing to be here and listen and participate, I'd be excited to share your name with Jeff. And I thought, again, somebody's so kind. And I watched how kind you were in his interview. And I've seen so many other interviews of people who I go, I know that person well. It's wonderful of how you want their authentic answer. There's enough of me out there. If somebody just types in my name at Google, great, you'll find the business stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But now getting to explain some of the unique history of why Memphis came about, why I'm sometimes almost embarrassed that I call myself the Memphis Group. The intent wasn't for it to ever get bigger. It was just a placeholder. Then all of a sudden it became successful. I'm like, can't hide from that one. Yeah.
Which is kind of, it goes back to the very start of this thing, right? That's why I don't,
you didn't have to do too much research. That's how you draw it out.
That's it, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the cool thing, because people that have like a laundry list of accomplishments, whatever those are, athletic, business, life, artistic, whatever, right? And somebody Googles them, it's like the Wikipedia of 1987 won this, 1992 won this. I think if every interview is the same and then every interview goes to the Wikipedia and the person gets asked the same questions over and over, eventually I would assume that gets very boring.
Yeah.
It's not who they are. That was just a moment in time. That's why I don't do anything. Because
yeah,
you got to where you wanted to go.
Yeah.
That's it.
I feel like I have been a part of that. My life is never just about me. Again, I think of all the people who I'm surrounded with, from the band, from the companies, from the speaking, but the ground is my wife. And that person that I eventually turned to and understood that when I face extreme challenges in my career where I've questioned how am I supposed to feel? And one time she said, you could tell me, she goes, I wasn't there. So I don't feel the horror the same way you did. But I think about something that she was participating in. She wanted to go down to this art show down in the US, and they're selling $1 million pieces of art. Something she's been involved with as a volunteer in her career and opportunity in the Stampede and things like that. She's well established. So we're down there, and I'd just become an officer for a short period of time.
So you're buying a painting?
Yeah, yeah. Not making that kind of officer money. And I'm at the table that I'm sitting at, there's full of people, and there's a gentleman who's got a few medals on his chest. And again, I wasn't wearing any, didn't understand the relationship behind it. And as we were enjoying the evening, we're talking about a few things. And I went up to him a little bit later, and I said, can I ask you a question? I said, I can understand appears like you've served. And he said, I did 27 years in the Navy and 10 years in the Marines. Hoorah. And these weren't a question I'd ever really asked my dad, right? Because it's just my dad. I didn't ask him those questions. And I said, could I ask you something? He goes, yeah, go right ahead. He says, I said, can you teach me something about leadership? He said, why don't you come to the back of the room with me? So we walked to the back of the room, buy a couple drinks. And he turns to me and he says, son, just the fact that you asked that question means you're already halfway there. And that was profound because I understood what I'd been doing of asking the questions was right. And when you ask authentically, people give authentic answers. And he said, here's the only thing you got to know. He says, you got to know the way, you got to show the way, and then you got to go the way. I'm like, is it as easy as that? He goes,
thanks.
Think about it. He says, if you understand what you're trying to accomplish and the people that you're working with, you've shown you've come to a consensus. This is what we think should happen. Somebody has to make a decision. But he says too often or not, people don't make a decision. They know what they want. They've talked about it, but nobody makes a decision. He said, so when it comes to being a leader, at some point you got to make that decision. And I've stood by that in every aspect of my life. And I tell people, There are times I have to make the decision. That might be the rank that I'm in and I have to make it. But then there's other times when it's the band, I go, do you guys want to play this song?
Mm-hmm.
No, we don't play the song. Well, then we're not playing that song. Do you guys want to play this song? Yeah. Then with decisions essentially made. Mm-hmm. We're going to play that song. Mm-hmm. When we song right, do you like this idea? At the end of the day, what is best for the product? And the product sometimes in music isn't just the song. What's best for your soul? Mm-hmm. If you don't want to sing that song, then don't play that song. If you want to write that song, let's write that song. So that, the authenticity, their relationships, everything I've ever learned has come down to communication in a relationship. Every man, woman, child that has ever come to me saying, well, here's where I'm struggling. Does the other person understand what you're trying to express?
Yeah.
And then they go, well, here's what I've been telling them. So well, if I didn't understand it, what makes you think they're going to understand it? Mm. And I may not need to know the answer. You have to come up with a better way to communicate. Mm. And that also becomes part of the crux of our societies. People go, well, this happened to me in Ottawa recently. Well, we've been offering the Indigenous population all these opportunities to come to Ottawa and tell us their stories and tell us their problems. I go, do you ever think about going to them? Never occurred to them to leave Ottawa. And I said, if the only thing I've left you with is the opportunity to build a relationship, so then I've done my job. I don't know. It's crazy.
I agree.
It's crazy.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Thanks for doing this.
I can't say, I honestly don't know how long we've been sitting here. I have smiled at every question you've asked. You've made them insightful. You've made me challenge myself to sometimes be honest about what have been the hardest questions I've ever been asked. Ask myself, am I comfortable talking about some of the fears? Admitting to the fact that, yeah, I've had an older brother who was always there for me. In ways that were different though, too. There are times where somebody has to say no, right? And when it's your parent, well, you're just angry about it. When it's your brother, I thought about it and I'm like, you know what? In the end, he was right. You know, but if he was always honest before, he was always going to be honest then. So thank you for hearing that and talking to a guy who's an older brother versus talking to the one who seems to get everything that he wants. you know that too. Yeah. And so how you opened the dialogue, how you shared, thank you so very much. It's
fun for me to do these because every time that I get to sit down with somebody, I have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I just, I trust it now that, okay, I think, and for a character like you, and this is some like insight, somebody that's a professional speaker, someone like Alvin Law, and you, my thing is like, my game in my head is like, how do I, because you guys are so good, you speakers, you specifically, it's a very, the message is very clear. It's very thoughtful. The game in my head is like, how can I get him to like pause and be like, oh, I need to think about this differently.
Yeah.
And so that's what's, as we're talking, I'm like, that's what's happening in my head as I'm listening to you. My goal is that when you go to edit this, there is no editing.
There is no editing.
I don't do any. Zero. Never. Once.
Are you sure? Because when I've watched it, I'm like, there was no pause.
There
was nothing.
There's no editing.
Oh.
It's start and stop.
I'm telling you, there's a few times I'm like, wow, that person talking moved flawlessly through it. And again, that's what I am trained to do. When I hear somebody with the ums and the ahs, I'm like, okay, well, he was obviously not chasing that or for whatever, didn't have time. Wow. Yeah.
Zero.
And the nature of, for me, when I don't have to interview people as much anymore. I moderate sessions and things, but to make them have to think. I've trained myself on what my proper response is so that it gives me an extra few seconds in order to talk. I'm not trying to get people to cry, but I am trying to get people to, how do their authentic voice, which I know is exactly what you're trying to get to. And that's, you do it very well.
Thank you.
You listen well.
Appreciate it.
And often I work with directors who will ask a question and I know they're looking past me. They're not great. They don't know how to be authentic. Their job. And I don't change my view, even though they're not looking at me anymore because it screws the camera up, but they're not good. And it's, as we go through these experiences, it's like, I hope you become better.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, you were very confident. And after 166, I think you've built a hell of a brand. Yeah.
I end the show with one question. When I say Calgary, where's your head go?
I say it's an oasis. And the reason I say that is because we have thought leaders in our community, but I have friends from all over the world and people I've just met for the first time. And I'll say, well, I'm from a little place in the west side of Canada called Calgary. And they'll say, is that anywhere near Banff? And I go, as a matter of fact, that's an hour from my door. And they go, we've always wanted to go to Banff. And they don't equate it at the time, but they know when they start their planning that they're coming through Calgary.
Yep.
I've lived a lot of places. When I drive around this city and I can see the entire city, it's different than other cities that we travel to where you don't get to see the volume, the scope of it. And then I turn my head and I'm looking at the most beautiful mountains. I was just recently in Austria and I go, it's nice mountains, but it's not like what we get to see. And then when you come into Calgary and we have the arts and we have the sports, we have the biggest concerts that come through town. It's all here. It's all available. We have the communities. We have comfort. We have safety. The fact that the Métis community is feeling welcome, shared relationships with Indigenous partners. There's so many things. And I think, how can this all be so real that we're not challenged with as much terror that happens in the rest of the world? And I look and I go, this just feels like an oasis to me. I hope it never changes. There's always fear. I face that. I face what happens down south and that some of that terror could start to infiltrate here. I think someday that could be part of our life, but right now, if we focus on building strength, let's keep this oasis. Blue Sky City, 300 days a year. When I'm on the West Coast and I go, yeah, this is a nice place to visit, but where I live, there's 300 days of sun. And it's pouring rain and it's cloudy and dark. And they go, what's that like? It's like heaven on earth.
Agreed.
What does it mean to you?
Well, it's my everything.
Yeah.
It's allowed me, it's given me every opportunity that I've been able to like turn into something. It's everything. It's family, relationships, jobs, community building tools, music, like it's just everything. It's like I lived in Toronto for 11 months and it's the only time I've not been here. And it's the thing that allows me to do everything that I want.
It'll probably be offensive to a few people out there, but I always tell people, I like going east, but I sure as hell love coming out west.
Get it.
When I'm in Toronto,
I get it.
I'm sorry. I can't wait to get out of here.
Yep.
Yeah. There's beauty, a lot of beauty. You go
For sure.
further east, it's beautiful, but it's not the west. Nope. There's something about being out here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Agreed. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you very kindly. Let's take the rest of the day off on me.
Done.